Ism's good, pal.
Man, I'm feeling good.
I gotta be honest, man. I feel kind of weird and a little nervous because I feel like it's been a year since.
But
Oh yeah. Hey man, Happy New Year.
Hey buddy, Happy New Year. Or Happy New Years, as I like to say.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. We're a podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and trying to raise our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. We're your hosts, Woody Brown.
And Tyler Benz.
Hey, man.
Hey, pal.
Well, I guess we got to kind of get it all out there. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Did you have a good time?
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, belatedly. Yeah, we had a great Christmas. My kids, boy, they were out of school for a long time this year.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I love it, working at home, I also don't love it.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I'm very, empathetic.
You want to let kids be kids, but at the same time, like in an equal amount of effort, you also want to just be quiet.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember like when I was growing up, you would hear, and I don't know if it was like from a movie or something. I'm sure Clay will hit us up if it is. But there was like, it was sort of frowned upon and looked at as like sort of a negative thing for like the old school parents of like previous generations. Whenever they would say, "Oh, it's better for children to be seen, not heard."
Mm-hmm.
But boy, there was something to it.
I mean, yeah, it's just hard not to get distracted too, or jump in. Siblings will be siblings, and they're going to argue and stuff. And a lot of times they'll just figure it out and work it out on their own, which is important. But it's real hard not to just jump in and be like, "Everybody, be quiet."
Oh yeah. Oh well. One thing about, I don't think I've told you this. I'm this close to adopting a small Asian boy in our neighborhood.
Okay, I didn't know where that was going, whether or not I was going to make it into the episode. You know what I mean? It starts off like that, and I get real tense.
Like I'm building some tunnels.
Okay, just keep going.
Anyway, I walk in one day. I had been out. I come in, and like there's a million kids in our neighborhood. Like it's a really great sort of setup.
Yeah.
It's very like kids are just everywhere. But we typically usually don't let the kids like in our house. We let them play like in the backyard and all that good stuff. And our neighbors, and my buddy Matt, like they have like a great setup. They have like a trampoline, like playground and all that stuff. And it's like gated, like fenced and stuff. So usually they're either behind our house or over there doing all that stuff. Well, I walk in one day and just speeding by me comes this small little Asian boy. And then after him comes my youngest, Elliot, and I'm like, Elliot, I'm trying to be like sort of subtle, and I'm like, Elliot, who's this? And she's like, oh, that's Cairo. And I'm like, who's Cairo? And why is he in my house? And they're just like running around. She was like, oh, he broke into a house too. And then just starts maniacally laughing, and then they just run off. Come to find out, it's this little kid in the neighborhood. Like, it's kind of a long story. We ended up like buying him like some Christmas presents and dropping them off. And like, I just love it. He's so funny. And like,
a cool name.
He's got a great, but it's weird because it's spelled, which kind of leads into our episode topic. It's spelled like Cairo, like Cairo.
Well, I think instead of getting into a long story that may or may not be entertaining to our listeners who have waited and reached out. And first off, before we do dive into the episode,
we're not dead.
We're okay. And we hope that everybody out in California is okay. Some of our friends having to get the heck out of Dodge out there because of those wildfires. Usually, typically at the end of our sort of season, we have sort of like a, season finale. And this year we kind of did with less sort of grand Fanfare, yeah. Mainly because the holidays kind of landed in the middle of the week this year, and that always kind of throws me off anyway.
Yeah.
Work was super busy. Tyler got sick. Like Tyler said, our kids were out of school.
Yeah.
Basically, we decided to take more time off. And when we take time between seasons, we kind of go on like a little bit of a fast from social media, from, being in the studio so much because we do it, throughout the year, giving our family, the attention they deserve, but also just like catching up on reading stuff that is outside of our podcast sort of topics and stuff. And now I say that, and at the same time, the truth is we still end up reading stuff that we're like, oh man, we got to put this in the next season and all this. So what we thought we'd do, since you haven't heard from us in a couple weeks, and we did get messages, because now you can leave comments on Spotify right at the episode, which is nice, and also in our email inbox and direct messages on Instagram and all that. So we wanted to make sure we let everybody know we're doing fine. The show is still good. Yeah. We're just on this break between seasons as we get ready for season 5 in a couple of weeks. So we thought we'd do this sort of bridge episode that will, give us an excuse to talk about something cool that we read over the holidays and also just get back in the same room.
Yeah, and also, I think it's worth being said that typically we would have done, and we had plans to do one, if not even 2 other episodes, but I got really sick, and I couldn't talk at all, completely lost my voice for a week and a half. And so instead of going a little further in January, maybe an extra 1 or 2 episodes, we're kind of just throwing an extra one in before the next season kind of starts. So just to tide you
over. And
over.
that time we also just sort of utilized to actually force ourselves to plan and then start recording even. So we're not going to necessarily be off. We're already going to be working on season 5. That being said, here's what's interesting. And I know we've talked about something related to this in a previous episode a couple seasons ago, but today's story is actually one of the most bizarre but captivating and just ultimately, for me, fascinating cases that I've come across. And I know for Tyler, there's a reason why he sent it over to me,
Oh, yeah.
It is about a woman named Dorothy Eady, who claimed not just to remember a past life, but to have lived as an ancient Egyptian priestess thousands of years ago.
Yeah, this case is so fascinating, and Woody believes that we've possibly already mentioned it, maybe because we did an episode kind of related to this topic, but I know that we haven't fully delved in, even if we did sort of throw it out there. But this case is so wild because and I we can kind of break the news. We don't have to hold it anymore. It is tied to a type of reincarnation. But the thing that's fascinating about this case specifically is in a lot of these cases of reincarnation and sort of the past life hypothesis kind of thing is that, you typically will have a kid who, and I don't know how to explain it. I don't know where it falls within my own personal belief system because I just don't know how it lines up. However, in saying that, I think it would be very, very naive of me to say, oh, there's absolutely nothing there because there's so much evidence that there is something happening. And with this case, though, it's a little unique and special because not only is it just this thing happened when she was a little kid and she remembers. Usually in those cases, the memories fade away and they kind of regress as they get older, and it's almost like they grow out of it, or maybe the veil is, comes down and they're unable to have those memories that they once had. With this case in particular, it's fascinating because it will carry with her, or she'll carry it with her throughout the rest of her life.
Right. And the thing that's cool to me, you mentioned you're not really sure what you believe in. And over the last, I guess, couple of months, we've gotten a fair amount of new listeners and stuff. So if you've returned,
welcome.
Welcome back. And so just so that if you haven't had a chance to go back through the back catalog of 4 seasons of episodes just yet, where we kind of our positioning on, what we believe in terms of things like reincarnation is far less important to us to sort of really, I guess, put out there. More important, it's just these concepts of things that exist that are just absolutely fascinating because, like, you can't really... The thing about reincarnation stories, and that episode that we kind of talked about, you can listen to it here.
Hear more about this on That Would Be Rad, Season 2, Episode 10, Reincarnation and Past Lives.
The thing that fascinates me the most about these kind of stories is that there's elements of, it sort of, I don't know, wets my whistle, so to speak, with my interest in dreams, with my interest in dimensions and time travel and, all that stuff. And there's elements of all that to me in the concept of reincarnation. And so every time I hear one of these, now sometimes, if you're like me, or anybody, I think it's natural for all of us to kind of sit there despite our own individual belief systems. Everyone's going to always still have, even just a small element of it, sometimes bigger, this question in their mind of, okay, what happens to us after we die?
Yeah.
Do we go to some heavenly afterlife? Are we reincarnated into a new body? Or, and this is sort of one that I don't believe, and that is that, there's simply just nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's abysmal,
I
don't like to think of it that way.
Yeah, it just seems very, like, nihilistic, hopeless.
Yeah.
There's nothing to, like, look forward to. And while this is, like, a pretty substantial piece of, like, some of your more, like, occult practices and sort of esoteric kind of belief systems, it is pretty normal in, like, Buddhism, like Hinduism.
Yeah.
And there are some, like, in some of the early Christian beliefs, there are some things to be said, or some arguments for, like, some of those early Christians believing that there was, like, a possible, like, type of reincarnation. Like, it kind of gets, you're talking, like, early man, like, early eras. So it's hard for us to, like, kind of wrap our head around. But there are some early Christian beliefs that there was a component of reincarnation in Christianity.
And I wasn't really going to go too far into this, but I seem to remember at some point, either you told me this or someone else did, that at some point, one of the things that potentially was taken out of what we now know as the Bible had something to do with reincarnation.
Right. Yeah. That is one of the, I don't know if it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm pretty sure it's like, it's somewhere in, like, the Apocrypha, which would have been, like, considered, if you don't know what that is, they're the uninspired, quote unquote, books that were written in between the New and the Old Testament.
Right. Which, if you think about that in terms of timeline, you're talking hundreds of years and stuff. So it's kind of crazy. But before we dive into Dorothy's life, though, since we've kind of taken this, quick sort of scratch the surface on belief systems and stuff, Tyler's right. Reincarnation is a belief that's embraced by many cultures around the world and religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, for example, and even certain, like, indigenous traditions. And the basic idea is that our soul or spirit is reborn into a new body after we die. And if you're, a hardcore sort of simulation, theory believer, then it would be essentially like our consciousness is uploaded into a new one, and we get to essentially play the simulation again.
Yeah.
Most stories about reincarnation are kind of vague. I mean, they're in that episode that we mentioned previously, we talked about some children claiming they remember either a town that they've never been to, or describing people they've never met, or even describing, I remember this kid talked about being a pilot and knowing how to fly and that kind of thing.
That one's crazy.
Dorothy's case is, in my opinion, after kind of reading about it, it's in a league of its own.
Yeah,
It fuses reincarnation with faraway lands, ancient treasures, and this long-lost era. And also, it just really reminds me of being a kid because it's sort of that early 80s Indiana Jones vibe. Because it all started in 1904 in Blackheath, a London suburb.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Pretty cool place, if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you?
We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. So Dorothy Louise Eady was just 3 years old when she suffered a terrible fall down a flight of stairs. Her parents rushed to her side, but when the doctor arrived, he pronounced her dead.
Which, real quick, and I'm not driving away from the doc here, but that's another sort of unique part of this story. I would say almost every story that I've heard regarding like kids remembering a past life is when they're very young. This one happened specifically after she had this, kind of massive head trauma.
Yeah. Fell down the stairs, man. And
the doctor pronounced her totally dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
Then I think it was maybe an hour later. And this is while the doctor's sort of preparing her to move her body.
Right.
Now, just imagine this, man. You're a parent. Now, I don't know what this says about early 1900s medicine in London or whatever, but, that's also a terrifying thought. Like, just imagine the people that just, like, buried alive.
Well, the parents were, there is, like, proof that they were, like, pissed.
Oh, well, I'm sure.
I mean, obviously. But.
I mean, can you imagine? You're going through this trauma as a parent, trying to figure things out, and then all of a sudden the doctor, this is what happened. The doctor is preparing to move her body, and all of a sudden, Dorothy's just sitting up in bed, wide awake, just playing as if nothing had happened.
Yeah, and they said right after she awoke, she went into her like little, I don't know if it was like her room or like a playroom, and just started playing as if nothing had happened.
Right. And so, two things. One, as a parent, you're filled with joy, of course, at the miracle, and then just anger at the doctor. But then, imagine you're the doctor and you're just like, okay, we'll just have to. And then all of a sudden, whoop, this person sits up. I mean, terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Shortly after this accident, though, the parents started to notice that Dorothy's behavior shifted. She became withdrawn, nervous, and startled by even like mundane things. She'd hide behind furniture and tell her parents repeatedly, "Take me home." When they reassured her she was home, Dorothy would burst into tears and insist that they were wrong. And then around this time, this is when she started having these really vivid dreams or even visions of a place that she described as a vast building with towering pillars surrounded by a lush garden. In her waking hours, she spoke about this place longingly, as if she had been there before. But remember, folks, she's 3 years old, right? Yeah. Now, I'll rewind back to my memory when my youngest was, I don't know, probably around 3. And she used to tell people that her grandma was in jail. So you never know what a 3-year-old's going to say.
I thought you were going to talk about, like, what is it, the skits?
Oh, God, I forgot about that. Yeah,
that's terrifying.
I'm not going to talk about that again. That's just, no. Someone would just say, "Hey, how's your grandma doing?" "She's in jail." And they're like, "Well, what?" "Oh,
wow.
Sorry." I'm like, wait. Now you're having to explain, and now it totally looks like you're just making it up to this person. You haven't seen it in a while. Anyway.
Also, and I don't want to jump the gun if you're going to get into this, but one of the other facts about this is after she, I guess, came back to life, if you will.
Yeah.
She immediately consciousness. Yeah, regained consciousness. She immediately had an accent. Like her speech totally changed. So I looked into this, and it's actually kind of a common thing, which is called foreign accent syndrome, or FAS. And it's when people have, like, typically it's associated with like a stroke, head trauma, or even like migraines can cause it. And usually it's when your voice, there's some sort of, I don't know how to say this nicely, but it's like usually if there's like some type of like brain damage involved to where it almost sounds like you have a foreign accent, but it's really almost almost like more of like an impediment.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, as you'll find out, that like maybe it wasn't that at all, and maybe it was just
actually an accent.
Yeah.
What's funny about that is I remember, I don't know, within the last year or so, I saw it was, maybe on Reddit or, one of those reels or whatever, because I don't have TikTok, but
I don't know.
And it was like this lady who, and I swear I sent you this article because I ended up kind of wanting to read about it. This lady who, just started having this strange accent, and then she's just like speaking an unknown language. And it's like, when I sent that to you, I was like, this lady's full of prunes,
Yeah.
But then now, in this context, I'm like, dang, it's always like these strange things that occur. And whenever you're looking at it through the filter of just like, quote unquote, normal life in society, it seems crazy. But then, it's sort of, once you start going down the road of, if this is possible, then I guess that could be possible too.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, I guess unfair judgment on my behalf. Anyhow.
Yeah, well, real quick, and that stuff is fascinating. Like we probably should do like a deep dive into that, because like, I remember growing up, it probably was in like some of the Time Life stuff, but like you would always hear those stories of like, I remember specifically there was a guy that he like dove into a pool and it was a little too shallow, and he almost died from it, head trauma kind of stuff. And then I think he was in a coma, and then when he woke up, he was just like a total prodigy on the piano. And then there was another story, a guy that I know personally, actually, where he was in this, and not to get, super spiritual here, but he was in at a church. He was in like it was kind of like a mission trip. He went to somewhere in South America, and he was like a worship leader, so he's like singing the songs, and he's like speaking to the congregation, but he's speaking in English. And then he said, as the service went on, he kind of felt like it was a really powerful moment, and he felt like, it was a move of the Holy Spirit. And suddenly, the dude just started speaking as he was speaking normally, and it was all in Spanish. And the interesting thing about this story is he's never studied Spanish one day of his life. He's kind of like...
He didn't even graduate from...
Well, honestly, school. He's just this like good old boy kind of guy.
Yeah.
High school education. I think he's he was like a plumber or an electrician or something like that. And from that day forward, he perfectly could speak Spanish.
Man.
And that stuff is just, it's amazing.
It is even like within the religious context, those kind of experience, and then outside of it too, when those kind of things happen. Now, this lady, I'm still convinced. I'll have to find that video. She's just making it up.
Oh, wait a minute.
Kind of like that lady that's standing in front of the pyramids, and she's like, "Yeah, I talked to aliens," and she's just like making it up, dude.
Yeah, I think. Are you talking about the lady? I think I may have sent this to you, where it's a lady that's she
See
speaks.
how he does, folks. Now he sent it to me. Got it. Okay, keep going.
No. She speaks. And I don't know why. I think she just woke up with this, but she speaks as if she's Chinese.
Oh, yep, that was the
But
one.
it's in English.
I sent it to you. Correct. Yeah, dude. She speaks. Okay, this is the problem. And we're really kind of getting off the rails here, but...
Oh, yeah, big time.
It's
what we
get
do.
to be back in. This is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
We're pros at this.
And she speaks English as if she was born in Asia, and English is...
her
maybe
second,
third or fourth language, okay? And so this is where it's just like, this lady's just straight up being a racist, bro.
It sounds it, yeah.
It's awful. Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a little bit, a couple years, and now Dorothy's 6 years old. And her parents take her to this British museum. Now, while wandering through the Egyptian exhibit, Dorothy's eyes just light up.
Mm-hmm.
She then runs to these statues of gods and pharaohs, kissing their feet, and declared, "I'm home. I'm with my people."
Yeah.
Now, Tyler, imagine you've taken your girls to a museum and then that happens. Like,
yeah.
What goes on in your head? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it struck me too, the fact that she immediately started like kissing their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, it's one of those. I mean, it's not technically like high strangeness, but we talk about it in these terms a lot, where if something is just so kind of like abstract for the scenario, like a 6-year-old kid from the UK that suddenly wakes up with a different accent and
after a head injury, not necessarily weird.
Right.
You're right.
Well, but the fact that she would go to like kissing the feet of the statue, that's not really
an ancient practice.
It's an ancient thing.
Yeah. You're not doing that on the norm in a suburb of London in 1900.
And also, this was kind of a big deal because her family were devout Catholics.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we'll get
so
to
that was
in a second.
That was like unheard of, basically.
So things get even stranger. So Dorothy sees this photo of this temple of Seti, and she points to it and exclaims that that's my home.
Yeah.
But then she becomes confused a little bit, asking where the trees and gardens were. To her, the image of the temple was familiar, but something was missing. From that moment on, Dorothy's obsession with ancient Egypt just began to consume her. She devoured every book and article she could find and began studying hieroglyphics with a speed and ease that even baffled her teachers. Now, again, she's like young elementary or primary school aged at this point.
Yeah.
She even claimed that she wasn't learning hieroglyphics, but remembering them.
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting is, didn't she run into,
when did you run into Will Smith?
No, but they ended up like...
Weekend, you stupid... You don't remember that?
No, what is that from?
Oh, man, Saturday Night. And just never mind, sorry.
No, but didn't the parents set her up with like a professor or something that taught her hieroglyphics? I think they ended up finding somebody who was well-versed in hieroglyphics that was willing to teach her, and he said that... He had said that, like, I've never seen anyone like pick this up so fast, especially like a little kid.
So yes, they kind of set her up at age 10 with this renowned Egyptologist named, I think, Eddie Budge. And he was also an author. And he offered to teach her how to read and write hieroglyphics, which she picked up basically instantly. And then, so now we're moving into her sort of teen years, okay? Early teen years. And she began, over time, had these dreams about this temple and, this place that she remembers being her home. Now, of course, when she looked at the photo, the reason why she was confused was because this is, to us, I say us pretty loosely since this is, over 120 years ago.
Yeah.
It's still ancient Egypt, right? And that wouldn't look familiar to someone that had been familiar with Egypt in sort of, its younger years, quote unquote. So there wasn't this lush garden. It was just, all sort of old and decaying. Yeah.
Barren, yeah.
So during her teenage years, she begins to have these recurring dreams of a spirit named Hor-Ra, who reveals to her that she had been a woman named Bentreshet. Hold on. She had been a woman named Bentreshet in a past life. According to Hor-Ra, Bentreshet was a consecrated virgin and priestess at the temple of Seti. She broke her vows after falling in love with Pharaoh Seti and became pregnant. When the temple priests discovered her secret, Bentreshet chose to take her own life rather than face the scandal.
Wow.
She meticulously documented these dreams and apparently filled over 70 pages with hieroglyphic accounts of her past life. Her dreams were so intense and vivid that she started experiencing these sleepwalking episodes and was even hospitalized for observation.
Awesome. Where she would wake up and just be like furiously writing just pages and pages of all hieroglyphics. And so then she would wake up and have no recollection of doing any of it.
Yeah, she would have no recollection of it, but she would also just kind of like almost be in this like trance state, just writing these hieroglyphics, just going bananas. And some other details were that like her father at this time, not in 1900 and something, but in Egypt, was a soldier, and her mother was a vegetable seller who actually died when she was just 3 years old, unable to care for her. Her father placed her in the temple where she was raised and later became a priestess. And then when she's interrogated by this high priest as a consecrated virgin and beaten because he's just like, interrogating her, she's refusing to answer. And this corresponded to her childhood nightmare of essentially being beaten and, and then I guess as that character taking her own life.
Man. Wait, you're saying that she took her own life? Like her previous wife?
Yeah, Ben Treshit or Ben Treshit.
So her mom and her took
Well,
their
I think her mom died when she was 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry
in Egypt or whatever.
Yeah.
It's getting a little, swampy with details. It's fine.
Yeah.
So her parents at this point and up into this point are basically just kind of chalking it up to a child's imagination. Then as a teenager, it starts to kind of get under their skin a little bit because like Tyler said earlier, they were devout Catholics. And they were kind of becoming concerned when she started making comparisons between Catholicism and the polytheistic religion of ancient Egypt. And she was doing so kind of loudly.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she was eventually expelled from Sunday school for refusing to sing hymns that criticized ancient Egyptians. Now, I've had my thumb on a couple pages of a hymnal in my life, and I can't really think of any that are just like downright talking trash about Egyptians.
I thought the same thing. I didn't understand that. That was bizarre to me. I mean, I guess like obviously kind of, Moses and like, but I can't think of any hymns that actually.
Yeah, I couldn't place one, but
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. Later, her Catholic school even expelled her for basically similar reasons. She didn't care. To her, ancient Egyptians were her people.
Yeah. And again, like, I guess she's in her teenage years at this point. So again, like, going back to what I said originally, this is not something that she like just grew out of.
Right.
She's stayed on this path and she's progressed. Like her interest in it has not waned whatsoever.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, exactly, dude. She's full on obsessed. I mean, she even sort of became known as sort of that, quote, weird Egypt girl.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, our kids go to schools that are much larger than the one you went to, for sure. I think there were, like 2 people in your class. Each year they kind of,
that's enough.
Who gets the history award this year? Well,
that's
we'll give it to this one, and then next year we'll give it to him. But I just say that because it's, if one person, even, my kids now, they have people in their class that are, what their interests are, Like when Woodrow was really little, his buddy just loved chainsaws. And I thought,
wait, what?
You're not allowed to
so dumb.
go over there. No, but I mean, seriously, he really did. He was like in his Cub Scout. He was really cool. He just loved the mechanics of it, All right, so she got this reputation of being the weird Egypt girl, and her obsession eventually leads her, and I guess this is like sort of the sweet part of the story, to marry this Egyptian man and move to Cairo, Egypt.
There it is, Cairo. See,
there it is. It's the synchronicity between our topic today and the little buddy that lives in your neighborhood.
Also, little known fact that I didn't get to finish because you cut me off earlier. One of the funny things about Cairo, if any of the kids are hanging out and one of the kids like rode to the place on a scooter or like a little 4-wheeler, he'll just hop on and drive it.
You're going to say steal it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he'll just drive it back to his house and then just leave it in the front yard.
Oh, man. Thief. Okay.
which is awesome. Yeah.
So she moves to Cairo, and the second that she steps off the boat, she falls to her knees, kisses the ground, and cries, "I'm home." After moving to Egypt and getting married, she begins to have these like trance-like episodes again. And during these states, she really kind of starts to, well, she claims to communicate directly with this entity named Ra again, and basically is dictating to her finally, like not just in dream form, but just dictating to her the story of her past life. This is when actually she wrote the 70 plus pages of hieroglyphic text detailing her life as Bentrishit sheet, I think is what it is, Bentrishit. And think about this. This is a story of a young woman who lives in this temple 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, elements of this kind of remind me of Paul Amadeus Dyanek and having like knowledge of time periods separated by such vast time like that. You know, like 3,000 years is no joke, man.
That are frankly impossible. I mean, it's kind of like, speaking of the kid, I hate that I can't remember his name, but like our previous episode on reincarnation where the kid, I think he was barely able to speak even. He was that young, and he's talking about like man on fire. And he's talking about going down in a plane, being trapped in the cockpit as the plane's on fire, go in the ocean. Like
like a World War II plane or something, right?
Yeah. Crazy.
And then didn't he go through like a flight sequence or something like that too?
Yeah. They took him to an air show and
never seen a plane. Hops in, starts doing the flight sequence.
He starts doing the whole thing.
That's just wild, man.
Yeah, it's amazing, man.
So, because of these episodes, and I guess ultimately like her obsession with it, I don't think it settled well with her new husband.
Which, real quick, one of the things that I thought about that I didn't really find anything that would suggest this, but there was a period in like the late 1800s to the early 1900s called Egyptomania. Have you heard about this?
I mean,
I think we probably talked about it. Yeah, where specifically the Brits and folks in England were just like obsessed with the concept of like Egypt and ancient Egypt and discovering about the pharaohs and hieroglyphics and stuff. And so I was kind of wondering of like, well, maybe, yes, she was sort of viewed as the weird Egypt girl, but at the same time, I wonder if that was lessened a little because there was that, Egyptomania. But then at the same time, I wonder if that actually hurt her credibility also.
Yeah, it's strange. I think there's a
like if people were like
50-50 mix. I think people that weren't in the sort of quote unquote industry or field of Egyptology and they're just fans of it, maybe that at first was like, oh man, that's interesting. And then they're like, wait a minute, now this happened when you hit your head.
Yeah, right.
And, it does start to sound, I mean, I'm not passing judgment on her as we go further. It's really super interesting. However, if someone came up to me that I didn't really know that well, heck, even somebody that I know really well, and they just started saying this, I would be a little worried for them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think
that would be my initial reaction.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, I'd have some sort of like, oh man, wow, okay. There'd be an element depending on how well I knew this person. If it was a complete stranger, it would be straight up like
a lot of charlatans.
Yeah, like the lady that speaks English with an Asian accent who's just about as cornbread as it comes.
I think the sort of what lends her credibility though is just her dedication to it. I mean, the fact that like, she even ended up marrying an Egyptian to basically gain access into her citizenship, I guess, to get like her whole life's goal was to get continually closer and closer and closer to her, quote unquote, like home.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
says a lot, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hard to sort of differentiate that being obsession versus just having this, because like when you're obsessed with a topic, you can really dig deep and just have this knowledge.
Oh yeah. I don't mean that in like a negative way.
Yeah.
I just mean like that was like her life's like mission.
Yeah, no. I know. I'm saying like it's hard to really sort of, if we're trying to quote unquote prove it or whatever, it's hard to say. But here's some more interesting pieces that we haven't even gotten into. So her and her husband's relationship and marriage doesn't last. I think he was pretty concerned, maybe even thought, well, I mean, I knew that this was interesting, and now we're starting to get into the crazy part.
Which is ironic because he is Egyptian.
Right.
So it was even too much for him.
Yeah. Which is interesting. That must be a lot. So after they get divorced, it's now 1936, Dorothy now goes by the name of Omm Sety, which means Mother of Seti. Mm-hmm. And she begins to work with Egypt's Department of Antiquities, and even began working at the Temple of Seti in, Abydos. Mm-hmm. Now, this is what I'm talking about. So her knowledge and even potential experience, helped her get a job at Egypt's own Department of Antiquities, which is really interesting because I imagine, if you're a foreigner, this is a pretty, this is an official Egyptian organization. They're not just letting somebody in who's an outsider. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if you know anything about that, I mean, especially for fans of like Graham Hancock and stuff, which we have a really cool clip to share later in the episode that just blew me away. It absolutely blew me away regarding Graham Hancock. But he's talked before about how that Department of Antiquities is so, they're really tough. They kind of refuse to even remotely go along with any belief that goes beyond, these were all built by, the pharaohs 3 months out of the years, or the ancient Egyptians. They were all built by these farmers and common people for 3 months out of the year. And that's just what it was. When they cannot, it's such a tightly gripped organization.
Right.
So the fact that I think if she wouldn't have married an Egyptian to gain that citizenship, I don't think she would have. And I'm not saying she married him just to do that, but she never would have had a chance, in even getting close if she wasn't, if she didn't have that citizenship.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Now we're just going to call her Omm Sety from now on. She ended up. So basically, what happens next is just, again, it's just taking it again to another level here, and it's just almost unbelievable. So she ends up identifying the exact location of this long-lost garden near the temple.
Yeah.
The garden that she had dreamed of since childhood.
3 years old.
Now, at this part, I got to break in again here. This is the part that I was like, I swear we've talked about this. And I think what happened was I ended up reading it from one of these magazines from the 60s that we just buy all the time on eBay. I think that's what it was, and I earmarked it to talk about it on the show, and just, like it always does, just kind of gets lost in the sauce. But I swear I remember that happening. But anyhow, the archaeologists, ended up excavating the area and found this garden just as she described, including its layout and the types of trees that had once grown there. She even led archaeologists to a hidden tunnel beneath the temple, which had been completely unknown.
Yeah, right. To me, that's a fascinating thing because they actually came to her regarding the possibility of this thing. And it said that she immediately walked to the location and was like, dig right here and you'll find it.
Just instant, dude.
And first try. They didn't try maybe we try it 3 feet over. Maybe we try, first try immediately goes into the tunnel.
Yeah, and not only that, man, in the Valley of the Kings, she ends up pinpointing the location of a previously undiscovered tomb. Now, like you're saying, dude, these aren't lucky guesses. They were specific and detailed sort of predictions.
Yeah.
This is where this case is so different to me, other than that kid sort of just knowing what to do. Maybe the people observing could have observed it incorrectly, and they're just like, wow, he really knows what to do, and he's just holding on to the steering wheel. Fast forward 100 years later, we're like, yeah, man, he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, right.
This is one of those situations where you can't just guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, this is a true needle in a haystack.
I mean, it's just wild.
Yeah. And also one of the things too that was interesting is that, one of her biggest things, kind of like what you said before, but I need to emphasize that this concept of this garden was something that she spoke about from the age of 3. So she was really big on this concept of the garden. And so when she first visited it like really affected her, the fact that there was no longer any kind of garden.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting is they did start excavating that area, and sure enough, like they started finding like trace, I don't know, what would they even be called? Like trace amounts of like leftover like vegetation.
Right, yeah.
You know, like in the soil. And
yeah, they
like,
could confirm the types of plants that she was talking about.
Like deep down.
Yeah, she also apparently on like one occasion she stood in this like pitch black room and correctly described a series of wall paintings that she claimed to remember from centuries ago. So imagine she's down in this area, in this underground area where there's just, you know, hieroglyphs and artwork on the walls. They haven't brought the torch yet.
Yeah.
She's never been down there.
Yeah.
And she describes it perfectly.
Man, I mean, again, it is hard to place this in, me personally, it's hard to place this in my belief system. But it's like, there's gotta be like something. Like,
right. I don't know how to wrap my mind around it is the biggest thing.
At all.
You know? So
yeah.
There are cases that I can kind of, just for the fun of it or to play sort of like devil's advocate, can kind of say, well, yeah, it's super cool, but, you know, this, and this. In fact, it would be less believable if someone like this kind of appeared to know stuff today, because it's like, well, they spent 3 years on the internet and then now, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
but back then, you know, she's at the mercy of what books she can get access to.
Oh, for sure.
How quickly she can learn it, you know? And then pointing out places that were previously undiscovered, previously unknown. So ultimately, she left behind, even despite her eccentricities. Like, for example, she would spend nights inside the Great Pyramid or performing these rituals apparently at the Sphinx.
Yep.
She was still highly respected, especially in the field of Egyptology, and archaeologists often consulted her on digs and trusted her instincts over advanced equipment as time would go on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Which I would imagine that probably, I mean, and I'm sure you would agree, probably at first these guys were like, this lady's nuts. But when she may be nuts, but her track record is like 100%.
Exactly.
So
and it's almost like she's a movie character, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
Steven Spielberg, where you at?
Yeah, dude.
You know?
Yeah.
So despite all that, they would like consult with her. I think she even predicted the location of, over her life and career, multiple tombs, including one that she believed to be that of Queen Nefertiti. And in the 70s, she claimed that there was a secret chamber beneath the Temple of Seti, holding a mystery yet to be revealed, because to this day, no one has discovered it, and she ended up passing away before she was able to sort of point it out, I guess. Yeah. And she died at the age of 81.
Which that kind of reminded me of, and we've still yet to do a deep dive on Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, for all of you. He's fascinating, but he always said also that there's a hidden chamber. I can't remember what he said it was, but it was like under the left paw of the Sphinx. And so you hear these like with Dorothy Eady and Edgar Cayce, like you hear all these things, but again, it always goes back to the Antiquities Council or whatever over there. They're just so, like, I think there was a period of time where it was like a little easier to be able to, explore and kind of do that stuff. But, any like period of like modernity in the last like 50 years, it's been like just completely shut down. You just can't, they just refuse to allow it.
Yeah. It's almost like they discovered something that they want to keep closed.
Yeah,
like
that's kind of what I think.
Potentially.
Yeah, because one of the things too, again, for fans of Graham Hancock, is that he's always sort of proposed that the pyramids were probably built much, 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 much older, much further back in time, specifically like the foundational stones. So like, and it's kind of like Machu Picchu and Chichen Itza and all those places where Göbekli Tepe, where you have this like foundation, or you have like the lowest parts of these structures that are just they're cut with like laser precision. You know, each stone is like, you know, something crazy, like thousands of tons kind of thing. It's just like you could slip like a piece of paper in between them. That's how like precise they're cut. But then as you go up, it's like the work starts to get more, I mean, the only way to say it is like human in a way, where it almost just kind of seems, and even the pharaoh like records and like the writings of like the hieroglyphs and stuff, there's a real delineation of these earlier ones are so precise and so beautiful, and then it almost just starts to turn into like almost like graffiti, you know, where it's like, oh, now it's this new age or this new, like the later sort of eras they're just kind of copying what was before, but it's like the newer ones were clearly done with, you know, copper chisels and like tool, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas like the older ones, there's no real, I mean, everything about them were so much like better technologically and like was just so much more sophistication than the newer ones, you know?
Yeah. It's wild, man.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the thing that I love about this case and this story is it really makes you think about things just in general. You know, you can go real deep with it and think about, you know, what happens after we die. We've talked about on the show before, like and I think it might have been Dinek, it might have been one of those other instances where, you know, two people sort of just end up being together no matter how many lives. They're always just like drawn to each other, you know? And I quickly sort of made it known on that episode, I think, that I was talking about my wife and I, not you and I, Tyler, but I think...
Twin flames.
Twin flames, that's right. So I don't know. It's always something that's interesting to me. And going back to what I said previously, where it's, you know, when we dream, are we having these old memories?
Oh, right, yeah.
Of our past lives? You know, I say that and it's like, I've never had a dream, personally, where I was like in an ancient time. Have you?
I feel like I should say yes, but I can't specifically remember. Like, it wasn't like...
Making it up.
No. I'm saying like, it does seem like maybe, but it was never something that was so... like poignant that I'm like, oh, on this date when I was this years old, I was doing this thing.
Well, I mean, just as an example, I can typically know like my surroundings and the clothing that I'm wearing. I'm not like a Roman gladiator or like an Egyptian slave, which would be more sort of, I guess, historically accurate for me in my bloodline.
Yeah,
but
making
like,
spaghetti.
Yeah, that's how my family, you know, on the Sicilian side of things. And so I got a little Egyptian in me.
You definitely have the Egyptian, like, nose. Big time.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Big time.
So, I don't know. For me, in terms of dreams, it sort of starts to lean more toward the multiverse type approach, which is, you know, when we dream, we're seeing the other possibilities within our lives, you know, across.
Or even like simulation theory, though, too.
Yeah.
I mean, which those could be kind of tied together in a way too.
So, you know, whether you believe in past lives or not, the cool thing here is, and whether or not she was right or wrong, whether or not she just made it all up, at the end of the day, she contributed significantly. She contributed significantly to the field of archaeology, Egyptology.
Oh, yeah.
And it was pretty extraordinary. And I mean, it's wild, dude. And I think what an amazing story. And like I said at the top of the show, it is one that, you know, we try our best to take breaks from this stuff, and we end up seeing it. And we're like, you know what, dude, we got to get on. We got to jump in there. Oh yeah, let everybody know, you know, that we're okay. We had a Merry Christmas. We hope everyone else did as well, and a happy holiday season and a new year. It's 2025, season 5 coming up. Oh yeah. And we're just so excited. We got a lot of big things on the horizon. And you know, let me just take a quick second here. I know we do it every show. Tyler's going to say it in a little bit. But I got to say, man, I just want to say thank you to every single person that listens to our show.
Oh, yeah.
You know, folks will reach out over the past couple weeks via email, new listeners, folks that just take the time out to say, hey, I found you guys. I just wanted to say, love what you're doing. I can't express it enough or even, I don't know. I can't express how much that means to us to get messages like that. And really, it just kind of feels like this like friend group is just expanding and expanding and expanding. And I just love it, man. So thank you so much for listening to us ramble on like we do.
Yeah, and also like on that topic, like I mean, I would venture to say that you and I, Woody, are probably, out of anybody else on the planet, I would say those things are totally not lost on us. Like, even just the idea of, like, you know, when we look at like analytics and stuff, and it's like, oh wow, we have a listener in, you know, we have several listeners in Iceland, we have several listeners like all across the globe. Like, I don't care how big this show gets or how small it stays. We're fine with it either way. This is kind of, you know, for our kids to listen back to when we're you know, dead and gone years from now. But no matter how big this gets, it's something that will never be lost on us. Just the fact of like that people take time out of their day to like listen to us just shoot the shit, and just, you know, we're just two best friends that have been best friends for years and years, and you know, we're already calling each other and having these conversations. And so the fact that you guys are kind of, you know, almost like jumping up, we're just kind of adding you
hanging out together.
To the phone call, almost like that means so much to us. One thing before we end it, there are a couple things that I do want to talk about the Dorothy Eady situation that I kind of found interesting. Number one, I think it's interesting that mistakenly, for a lot of people, the early Egyptians did not believe in reincarnation, which is sort of an interesting fact. They do believe in, you know, when you die, they are, you know, as we know, like with mummies and preserved, like pharaohs and stuff, there's a huge emphasis on like the burial rituals and that kind of thing.
Preparing you for the, quote, afterlife.
Yeah, for the afterlife. Yeah. But the interesting thing is, like, they don't actually believe that you come back reincarnated.
Yeah, that's right, man. I didn't even think about that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, to me, that was like a really interesting thing, because it's like, oh, this is weird, because she, you know, if we're taking her for her word, hypothetically, and we believe everything she said, it's odd that she has kind of come back. Because, I mean, and granted, like in sort of the more neo-pagan, it's called like Cometicism, where you're more sort of modern worshipers, if you will, of you know, Egypt and like the pharaohs and like the gods and all that stuff. Like it was sort of a resurgence, I think, in like it's like 60s or 70s maybe, where they kind of share those same belief systems of the early Egyptians. However, in that religion, they do believe in a type of reincarnation, which I think is where maybe a lot of people get it wrong. They think that the early Egyptians did, but they didn't. They believe that, or the early Egyptians believe that when you pass on, you kind of pass through a series of like trials, like tests almost, which is interesting because it made me think of that D&D session.
Yeah,
you know. But they go through some trials, and then if they do it successfully, and I think some of it is tied to the efficiency of their sort of burial ritual, which is interesting. And it kind of does make a case for why all that stuff is so elaborate. You know, for that culture, I would say there's no other culture that is as elaborate or opulent as Egyptians, you know?
Yeah. And their methodology.
Yeah.
Too. Like, you know, I go and I have these waves of interest. All my life I've been interested in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
But it kind of comes in and goes in waves for me about like, man, I really want to dive into this. And then it's just like, I never get a chance to. And it's like, man, if you're a youthful person listening to this, you know, for example, one of our kids or whatever, to just, you know, gosh, take the opportunity to just put down the manga for a second and just dive into some ancient Egypt studies, because now I will say, I think I downloaded it might have been on Audible or something, a full course, man, on ancient Egypt that I just haven't, taken the time to listen to. So
yeah.
Procrastination, it'll get you.
It definitely will. The other thing that I wanted to say is, by the way, one thing that I do think is really cool is say the ancient Egyptian dies and they successfully pass all of the trials. It's said that they go on to have their own like piece of land in a place called the Field of Reeds, which just sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I've always thought that was just, I don't know. It sounds so, I don't know, kind of like vague, but it's just really cool.
Kind of reminds you of just like that Moses.
Yeah, right.
And all the reed plants and stuff.
Yeah.
Or it could have been a bad translation and it's just thousands of kids playing the clarinet.
Yeah, that's where like the Pied Pipers come from. It's a long lineage. And no. Secondly, I like the idea also that, and it's sort of maybe a more abstract approach to this story of, so when she, and I can't remember the name. I should have stopped you when you were saying it. But when she gets to the point later in life where she's talking about how she would be communicated to by what was it?
Hora.
Yeah, Hora. As she sort of progressed, she would say that like she was hearing like that voice more consistently. Mm-hmm. So I did kind of get the idea. It did kind of take me back to, that like Zozo idea, or like, demons posing as like angels and that kind of thing. And like, oh, is this really this ancient pharaoh, or is it sort of masquerading? So I think if you are totally debunking the story, I don't know. I think there could be something to be said about like this entity kind of feeding into her, especially if she was really big on doing these like rituals in these temples and stuff.
Right.
So who knows?
Yeah.
And also I think that, there is the thought out there, and progressively I'm, leaning into it, is like, well, maybe these early pharaohs, like the ones that were building with laser precision, they're the ones that, all of the pyramids of Gaza are all perfectly lined up with like the stars, and like it's just so like perfectly made that maybe there was some tie with like the Nephilim type stuff, because some of them, you see some of the hieroglyphs and like you see like your common person, and then you see like the pharaoh, and of course it's like twice as tall, and
right.
And that's something that covers pretty much every culture on Earth. Mm-hmm. So,
not to mention the ones that have like, the bird face.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think every time we talk about Egypt, we always talk about one of the coolest sort of portrayals.
Stargate.
Yeah, the Stargate, man.
Amazing.
So freaking cool how they made those just be like the helmets, and they mechanically retract and stuff. I mean, just so cool.
I mean, or it could be looked at also as maybe it was similar to like the Fomorians. Maybe those pharaohs were those weird sort of human, animal-human hybrids that they talk about in the Book of Enoch.
Yep.
So, I don't know. This story just in general is so fascinating.
So good.
Yeah. And I can't, honestly, I think, like we said at the top, like whatever your beliefs are, we're not putting our full That Would Be Rad stamp of approval on like reincarnation, but there's a lot of things out there that are interesting, and maybe they do go against your personal beliefs, and hopefully they don't threaten any of those beliefs, but it's still just a topic that's kind of unexplainable, and those are the things as kids growing up in the 80s that we did and we still do find just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And, the cool thing about like not having to put a stamp on it, or, does it fall in line? Like, we don't have to.
Yeah, right.
None of us, right? I mean, we can like listen to the story. In fact, I think approaching things with an open mind doesn't mean that you believe it. And like you said, well said, was, you don't have to do it in a way that like threatens your faith.
Yeah.
And by the way, if your faith or belief is that fragile, then maybe you ought to, study deeper and strengthen it.
Yeah.
Honestly, because I think that if it can be so easily threatened, then, maybe that's something to take a look at in 2025. But yeah, man, you got anything else there that you wanted to add to the show? Or?
I think that's about it. I can't really, I think I've derailed as much as I can think of. If you would like to derail this conversation and offer your own insight, or maybe something that we missed or didn't think about regarding, the early Egyptians and reincarnation, any of the topics that we discussed today, you can do so over on our Instagram. Shoot us a DM, leave a comment, join the conversation. If it's a more long form comment, you can shoot it to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. Tell us your own urban legend. Tell us your own local folklore that maybe hasn't really made its rounds to the internet yet, and it's still only sort of a local thing told by like the old folks in your area. That's the stuff that we really love, and we'd love to hear from you. Specifically, if you're brave enough, we'd love to hear your own voice, and you can do that on the little voice memo feature on our website, thatwouldberadpodcast.com, where you can tell your own story and hopefully, show up on a future episode. Thank you so much to our patrons over on the Rabbit Trail.
Specifically, brand new members Ian, Larry, and Trey.
Let's go. Yeah, dude, that's awesome. We're just forever in debt to you guys. Indebted, I guess, technically, to you guys. And it means so much to us that, we're seeing that support in a physical form. And that's, it'll never not mean a lot to us. Tell a friend about the show. Leave a 5-star review if you have the time. It makes a huge difference for all of our international listeners. Like I was saying before, from all corners of the globe, we just want to say thanks, because it's just amazing, that we're sharing our culture with you guys, and it's just amazing to us. I guess that's about it. Woody, you got anything else?
I was just going to say specifically some quick shout outs to folks that reached out over the holidays. And again, it's impossible for us to know if you're a new listener. Like if you found our show over the past month or so, feel free to drop us a line, because it means a lot, like I said earlier. So thank you to Lou in Mississippi. By the way, also, we have tons of listener stories that are just literally mind-blowing stuff that we've been sort of collecting over the end of last year and into this year. So super excited. But again, thanks, Lou, for reaching out, and welcome aboard. But yeah, no, man, that's about it. We're excited. Again, the new season, we'll kick that off in a couple of weeks. But we just wanted to kind of say, hey, let you know we're doing well and share this cool story with you.
Yeah, and Happy New Year's also. Well, with that being said, we love you, we appreciate you, and as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. The way it You're my favorite song on the radio. Clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead, for you became a ghost. You always said